Japanese men over 50 outwork men half their age. Not because of discipline, not because of willpower, because of biology. Specifically, a 3,000-year-old medical system that classified what most men call laziness as a disease, identified its precise failure points, and built 7 corrective codes long before the first research lab existed. Modern science has now run the studies. Every single code checks out. In Japan, the state most men over 50 live in permanently has a name: Byong, Yamai, disease. Not character, not motivation, chemistry, with identifiable mechanisms and correctable biological inputs. 7 remedies, each one targeting a different system inside the male body after 50. Here is the first one, and it explains why every large goal you have ever set and then abandoned had nothing to do with how serious you were about it. Code 1. Kaizen. Every time you attempt to begin something significant, your prefrontal cortex runs a threat assessment. It scans the goal, calculates the effort required, and compares it against expected reward. For most men over 50, the dopamine system has lost enough sensitivity that large goals simply do not clear the reward threshold. The task gets flagged as threat. The body generates avoidance. You call it procrastination. Neuroscience calls it threat gating. The Japanese solution was precise and empirical. Start so small, the threat assessment cannot fire. 1 push-up, 1 sentence, 1 minute. A micro-action this size generates just enough dopamine to clear the threshold and open the gate. This is not motivational advice. This is how your nucleus accumbens actually processes reward signals, and the Japanese mapped it without ever naming the structure. Think of one thing you have been avoiding this week. One specific thing. Give it a name in your mind right now. Ask yourself this: what is the smallest possible version of starting? Not finishing, not planning. The smallest possible version of starting. Hold that answer. 6 more codes follow, and the last one tells you exactly when to deploy it. 6 codes remain. But first, understand why all 7 are biologically necessary. After 50, 3 systems begin failing simultaneously inside the male body. Your dopamine reward circuit loses sensitivity. The mechanism that makes beginning anything feel worth the effort degrades quietly across years without a single visible symptom, until the avoidance is already habitual. Your vagal tone drops, disrupting the recovery cycles, digestive efficiency, immune regulation, and sleep architecture that your daily energy depends on entirely. And your mitochondrial efficiency declines by up to 40%. Cellular energy generation slows at the source, and the body responds by rationing output and shifting into conservation mode. Less energy, less drive, less will. You experience this as laziness. The body is running a survival protocol. Japan mapped these 3 failures 3,000 years ago without laboratory instruments. The 7 codes are the precise biological corrections, 1 system at a time. Code 2. Ikigai. The Japanese don't ask what you do for a living. They ask why you wake up. This is not a philosophical distinction. It is the most powerful longevity variable in the epidemiological record. The Tohoku University cohort study followed over 43,000 adults for 7 years. People with a clearly defined Ikigai, a purposeful, daily reason to exist, had measurably lower all-cause mortality, independent of diet, independent of exercise, independent of income. Purpose itself was the isolated variable. When meaning is absent, the body's threat response stays permanently elevated. Chronic cortisol suppresses immunity, accelerates cellular aging, and degrades the same dopamine pathways that Kaizen targets. The failures compound each other. The Japanese built entire cultural systems to keep men purposefully engaged deep into their 80s. They don't retire. They pivot purpose. There is a precise, measurable biological reason for that difference, and it shows up in the mortality data without ambiguity. Code 3. Hara Hachibu. Stop eating at 80% full. 800 years old, Okinawa. Still practiced daily by one of the world's longest living populations. When you stop before full satiation, you keep the mTOR pathway suppressed. mTOR is your body's primary nutrient sensor. When it detects caloric surplus, it shifts cellular resources away from repair and renewal, rerouting blood flow and cognitive output entirely toward digestion and storage. When mTOR stays low, autophagy activates, the cellular self-cleaning process that clears damaged mitochondria, breaks down dysfunctional proteins, and resets metabolic efficiency from within the cell. The energy collapse you feel at 3 p.m. is not tiredness. It is mTOR responding to overeating. Your body entered digestion mode and took your cognition with it. Japanese elders stay metabolically sharp across decades because they never trigger that shutdown. Every meal calibrated not for pleasure alone, but for cellular performance. Laziness after 50 is often not emotional. It is physical overload running silently through the biology, unchecked, unrecognized, and named incorrectly for decades. Think about your last meal. How full did you eat? If the answer is completely full, your mitochondria are currently prioritizing digestion over cognition. Biology running exactly as programmed. The correction starts at the next meal. Not the next diet, the next meal. Code 4. Seiri and Seiton. Clear the space, organize what remains. Western culture frames this as personal preference. Japan classifies it as cortisol management, and the neuroscience is unambiguous. Every unfinished visual cue in your environment runs a low-level threat detection loop in your amygdala. Your brain processes clutter as unresolved information, incomplete tasks, pending inputs, open decisions requiring attention. That processing runs continuously and silently alongside everything else: your focus, your conversations, your sleep. Researchers measured cortisol across cluttered and organized environments and found a measurably elevated cortisol baseline sustained across the entire day in cluttered spaces. Not a spike, a permanent biological shift that never resets until the environment does. The Japanese classified physical disorder as mental pollution over 2,000 years before neuroscience confirmed the mechanism. What surrounds you is currently running inside you and costing you more energy than any task on your list. Code 5. Kintsugi. The ancient Japanese art of repairing broken objects with gold. Flaws made visible, made permanent, made part of the object's identity and history, rather than hidden from it. This is not aesthetics. This is threat response reprogramming at the neural level. Your brain's response to anticipated failure is neurologically identical to its response to physical danger. The amygdala fires the same activation pattern. Heart rate rises. Attention narrows. Avoidance activates. Perfectionism is not high standards. It is your threat detection system running an endless avoidance protocol, disguised as care and discipline. The Kintsugi practice reprograms this association deliberately, by honoring imperfect completion, by treating the finished, flawed thing as more valuable than the unfinished, perfect idea. The brain learns a new pairing. Finishing produces reward rather than threat. The pathway shifts one repetition at a time. Completion builds the signal. Perfection delays it indefinitely, and the body conserves the energy it was promised but never received. Code 6. The Japanese Pomodoro. 25 minutes of focused work, 5 minutes of rest. but with one critical addition the Western adaptation removed entirely. A ritual. One breath, one gesture, one deliberate sound before each work block begins. This is where your existing practice becomes your most precise biological tool. The ritual is Pavlovian conditioning of the prefrontal cortex. After 10 repetitions, that breath no longer signals transition or rest. It signals focus, automatically and permanently. The brain has built a conditioned association between the cue and the precise cognitive state required, without effort, without willpower, without decision. Ancient pranayama practitioners engineered this exact neural circuit 3,000 years ago. They had no neuroscience vocabulary. They had the empirical result, refined across generations until it was reliable enough to encode into daily practice. You already have a breath practice. You have already been building this pathway. The Japanese Pomodoro is the deployment structure that trains the circuit through repetition until it fires on command. For your next session of focused work, assign a single breath to it. One deliberate inhale before you begin, not during, before. This is how the circuit gets trained, not in months, in repetitions. 10 consistent repetitions is all it takes before the association locks into automatic function. Code 7. Wabi-sabi. Act before conditions are perfect. The Japanese don't wait for readiness. They move directly into the work with what they have, from exactly where they stand, in conditions that are imperfect by definition. This is the final code because it contains something the others don't. A law that overrides every other biological resistance mechanism in this list. Activation energy for any task drops measurably the moment physical movement begins. Not after you decide to start, not after you feel ready, after you actually move. The signal your brain requires to feel motivated cannot be generated through thinking or planning. It is generated exclusively through action. Most procrastination is not laziness. It is your threat prediction system running without the feedback it requires to shut down. Movement is the only input that closes that loop and releases the energy the body was holding in reserve. The Japanese encoded this in one observation that Western productivity culture never fully translated. Most procrastination is fear wearing patience. Now close the loop. The biological disease Japan identified 3,000 years ago has 3 measurable markers: degraded dopamine sensitivity, disrupted vagal tone, and declining mitochondrial efficiency. When these 3 systems fail simultaneously, which they do after 50, in most men who were never given the correction, the result is the state you have been calling laziness, a word that assigns the problem to character when it belongs entirely to chemistry. 7 ancient codes, now confirmed by peer-reviewed biology, target each failing system with a precision that no modern productivity framework has matched, because no modern framework started with the body. The daily protocol runs like this. In the morning, 1 micro Kaizen action before anything else. 1 push-up, 1 sentence, 30 seconds. The dopamine gate opens and the day begins from a position of biological completion rather than avoidance. At the first meal, stop at 80%. Your mitochondria begin their repair cycle at the next metabolic window. The mTOR suppression holds and the afternoon energy stays intact. Before focused work, 1 deliberate breath assigned specifically to that session. The prefrontal cortex receives the cue and the conditioned circuit fires. 1 area of physical space cleared each day. The amygdala loses 1 unresolved threat loop permanently. In the evening, 1 imperfect completion acknowledged, filed, and closed. The avoidance circuit weakens by exactly 1 repetition, and the neural association shifts fractionally toward reward. And each morning, 1 sentence written. Not what you do, but why you wake up. Not ambition, purpose. The single biological variable that outlasts every other health input in the longitudinal data, and the one the Japanese protected most carefully across every generation. And when conditions are still not perfect, move anyway. Wabi-sabi. Always. What the Japanese understood 3,000 years ago, modern biology confirmed last decade. These are not productivity habits. They are cellular commands, precise biological inputs for systems that were always designed to receive them. The body was ready. It has been waiting for the signals. Now you have all 7.